All right, it's time to talk about the Friday the 13th series. I wasn't going to do this until much later on. I wanted to talk about more, lesser known series and lesser known properties just to kind of get people to watch them. But I've had a few people ask me to do this now. Halloween just ended, and I've had an itch to watch these again. I've seen them, the first 8 especially, an ungodly amount of times. Friday the 13th, the series is such it's so close to my heart. It is a franchise that I adore. Even the shitty ones, I love, and I've seen way too many times. But I haven't watched them in a long time because I don't really rewatch film anymore. And this channel is actually giving me that opportunity to go back and watch a bunch of the films that I really enjoyed. And a bunch of series that I want to revisit, even though I remember not enjoying many of the entries. But though, let's save those for another time, because I pretty much enjoy every one of these, except for a couple. And we'll see how those go now that I'm going to go into them with a more critical eye, as opposed to just watching them purely for fun. Now, I know a lot of people say that Halloween influenced this movie. But I think that it only influenced this movie purely on title and pushing Sean S. Cunningham to, make this film. He saw the success of Halloween and he was like, wanted to jump on that success. So he went out and he took a bunch of money and he put out a full page ad on this movie, on this movie title, and put it out there before he had a script, before he had a budget, before anything. And, people called him up and were like, offered him the whole $550,000 to do it. So as I said, I do think that Halloween influenced the initial idea behind doing the film at all. But the film is 10 million times more influenced by A Bay of Blood or Twitch of the Death Nerve by Mario Bava. I mean, very similar films, and that film predates Halloween by like 7 years. And I do believe that even though Bay of Blood did come first for sure by 9 years, I give full credit to Friday the 13th with starting the slasher craze of the 80s. It really set up the template for what would become the slasher formula. If you really watch like slashers from 81 on, like after the success of Friday the 13th, they really follow that film almost to a T. Not so much Halloween, they follow this film a little bit more. I totally understand why people think, but it makes sense because Halloween made this happen. So in a way, it's responsible for it. But as I said, just watching this film and then watching, all the slashers that came after it, from Graduation Day to, you can really just go down the list of them, especially holiday they're holiday slashers. But still, like all the slashers that there were, I really think that this was that film that truly made that craze happen. Anyway, let's get into this film. I obviously have a ton to say about it. One thing that I don't think that this movie gets enough credit for is its score, and how it's used. The score is only used when the killer is in the vicinity or is about to strike. Outside of that, this film has no soundtrack. It's like completely silent. And then when the killer comes around, it always cues the music to let you know when it's time to be afraid or to be worried or to get tense. And I like those little musical cues that this movie gives you. Not that you don't know when to be scared, but because of the POV cam, you're kind of unclear of what's happening in the beginning of like, what is this? This is just shaky camera. But when the music hits, it's like, oh shit, this is getting tense. Oh, that must mean demise for these people. Like, oh, this is the killer. It gives you a good insight of where you're at and what's about to happen. Obviously, with multiple watches, you're well aware of what's going to happen. But I like the tension building that the music has. It's not just there to fill up the background. It's there to intensify the moment only. And it's clearly a full-on, like, rip-off of the Psycho music. I mean, it's so close. But Psycho music worked, and so does this. So yeah, I really like the POV slasher cam that this movie sets up. Yes, it's done in other movies, absolutely. I mean, shit, Michael Myers has one in the opening scene of Halloween, but I really like how it's used here. It keeps that mystery alive of who the hell is doing this, because this film really is a whodunit, and this really can only be the only one in the series that has that, because from here on it's Jason, you know it's Jason, and that's that. But in this one, before you knew, because Jason wasn't anybody, they didn't even mention Jason's name until the very end of this movie, so you knew nothing. You just knew people were getting killed. And I think that watching it now watching it, as I said, with a more critical eye, I think that they're trying to make you believe that Steve Christie is killing people. I mean, basically, I mean, he drives a Jeep. It looks a lot like hers. And he goes away, and while he's away, everyone's dying. And then they cut to him at the diner, and then he comes back and he gets killed. And I think that's that moment of, oh shit, it's not him. Now, as I said, it's been a long time, and this movie is 37 years old now. So I think that that's very obvious now, but I think in the theater, back before anyone knew who Jason was or Ms. Voorhees or any of that, I think this was that mystery of like, oh shit, like who's doing this? And it feels like that when I'm really like trying to sit back and watch it as like a first time viewer. It was fun. Anyway, I really like that freeze frame scream in the opening, and then the title comes and it breaks the screen, breaks the glass. Love that shit. It reminds me obviously of the 3D title in part 3. I really like the town people in this. Just, when Annie is coming up and she gets in town and she's like asking everybody like, where's the camp? And they turn around and they're just like I love that like record screech, nobody says anything, but there's just this taint on that place that everyone just doesn't want to talk about. And then she comes outside and Ralph attacks her. Like, I love that whole setup, that whole segment. I mean, there's really nothing about this film I don't love. It's very little that I can say bad. And then of course, like your graphic kills, like that wasn't really a thing until this started happening. I mean, in America, you didn't really have a ton of graphic kills, especially in like wide release theater stuff. And Tom Savini being who he is and how he does this, it's wonderful stuff. I mean, it gets better and better. The second one actually is less gory than this one because the company complained about the first one being so graphic and they regretted letting it get by them. So they toned it down in the second one. But the gore for the time is really cool. And I'm going to do something here at the end that I'm going to do in every single one of these reviews. I am going to do my favorite death, the kill count, the hottest chick, and my favorite character. I really like Betsy Palmer's portrayal as Pamela Voorhees here, and I especially like the close frame shots of her face. She's such a great actress, and she brings such a presence with her. And the close-ups of her face really show off all those subtle emotions of her insanity and her rage coming through. And I think that while people can critique plenty of things in this film and say they're cheap and they're, this is a shitty movie and whatnot. And while I will agree with them to an extent that this isn't the best made movie ever, I think that, Sean S. Cunningham really hit a great note there. And made a great decision, doing these close-up shots of his best actress on set, especially during her breakdown moments. And I really, really liked it a lot when I was paying attention to it and really paying attention to like her face and her mannerisms and everything. I also love that even though Alice does go through some Laurie Strode moments where she bests the killer and then leaves their body without finishing them off multiple times, much like she does in Halloween, Laurie does in Halloween. At the end of this fight, she finally decides to grab a machete and cut, Pamela's head right the fuck off. And it took Laurie Strode 3 fucking movies and 20 years later to do that. So she's definitely a little more badass than Laurie Strode ever was. But Laurie Strode finally did end up doing it, obviously, in H2O. But still, I just thought it was funny. I was like, when I was paying attention this time to it, and I had just watched H2O recently, I was like, man, there you go, Alice. You do it in 1 movie. I mean, she only fought this character for like 15, 20 minutes. It took Laurie Strode 20 fucking years. I also really like the Jason popping up out of the water thing. I think it's very unexpected. Now that you know it, now you've seen it a million times, it seems so obvious. But I think in the theater, people were like, oh, look, she got away. She's on the lake. She cut the chick's head off. I mean, what else could there be? And it's like, Jason. Now, whether or not she dreamt that or if that was Jason and then he grew up in like a year and became that, I doubt that. I don't know what that is. I think that was just, they wrote it with no sequel in mind. And then when when it made all the money, the $40 million that it made, it was like, oh, well, we need a sequel and she's dead and Jason's a kid and we can't have Jason being a kid. And why would he still be a kid when he died, 27 years ago or something? I think it's like 1953 and it's 1980 now. So I just think they wrote themselves into a corner and it was one of those things where they were like, we're not going to explain it. Fuck it. The only real things that I dislike about this movie, and it's minor little gripes, but number one, I just don't like when films use the present when they show like the flash forward scene to now. Just put 1980. It's gonna date your film later, like 5-10 years from now. You're gonna be, or 10 years from then. Film is forever. Film lasts for 20, 50, 100 years. I mean, to put the present is just stupid to me. It's like, this isn't, when I'm watching it now, this movie clearly didn't take place in 2017, nor did it take place in, 1995 or 1999 or all the other times I watched it. So just put the year it's set in. The present's stupid. And then Alice boarding up the door, like tying a rope around the handle, tying it up. Now, is it fairly realistic? I'm sure, but like her, like watching her take shit and putting it in front of the door and snacking this here and doing this here. It's like 2 full minutes of watching her block the door. And she doesn't even know if the killer's in there with her. So what's she gonna do if he or she is? It's like, she didn't put a lot of thought into it, and that's okay. I mean, she's scared. I get that, but I don't need to watch it for 2 straight minutes and then her go into the kitchen and look around and this. It's like a 4-minute scene of just watching Alice. And there's a decent amount of more of it. And once she gets away, she like goes into the next cabin and she's just sitting in there for like another 2-3 straight minutes before anything happens. Now, I understand that that's tension, but tension doesn't take that long to build. I mean, look at Halloween when Laurie goes over and she sees that, once she gets in the house, she sees that the window's open. She tells them to go upstairs and then she grabs a knitting needle and she sits in. It's like 10 seconds. It's like 8 seconds. It's really quick. And there's so much tension in that scene. Now, of course, John Carpenter's 10 times the director Sean S. Cunningham is, but I'm just saying that scene annoys me because it's just like, this did not need to be this long at all. She could have stuffed something under the door and threw like the couch or pushed the couch in front of her or something. And, watching it for so long was completely unnecessary. Now I'm going to point out a whole bunch of things that I find to be hilarious in this movie or just worth noting. Number one, I think that this movie might be responsible for it, but I'm not sure. I don't know what it is, but I personally will not swim in open water for any reason. Jaws had something to do with that as well, but even in lakes, I don't like it. I will swim in pools all day and all night, but if it is like out in nature and I have to jump in a lake and I can't see what's in the water, no, I won't do it. Next, Ned is a dick. Ned's character is a dick. He not only almost kills Brenda by shooting a fucking bow and arrow at her while she's trying to set up the targets, which is just unbelievably irresponsible and dangerous. It's like, dude, what if you missed? It was so close. Come on, man. And then he fakes his drowning when everyone's like back on the beach or whatever you want to call it. And, you know, he's out there a ways and they have to like run and they have to jump in the water and one's bringing boats out and the other one's like, it's insane. Like, that's such a dicky prank. And he's just an asshole. I'm kind of glad he died. You got Strip Monopoly. I definitely want to talk about Monopoly. Number one, fuck that win for ruining that game. We almost got to see Brenda naked. And if you pay attention, I'd never noticed this before. I'm sure there are people out there who've seen this movie as many times as I, and they'll be like, you've never noticed that? But I have never noticed this. Multiple times while they're playing Monopoly. The first time it happens is Brenda saying that she gets double sixes, and you can clearly see that is a 1 and a 2 on the dice. And then, you know, obviously it's written dialogue, but it's funny because it happens 3 times in a row. She rolls double sixes, supposedly. Alice rolls a 5, and then Bill rolls a 10. You know, that's what they say. And then you look at the dice, and they are clearly none of those things. I just found those to be very funny when I looked down, because especially the first one, especially Brenda's. Like, it is clearly a 1 and a 3. It's like almost in a close-up shot. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, it doesn't matter, but it was funny that I'd never, ever noticed that before. Brenda is someone who leaves the water running when she brushes her teeth, so she totally deserves to die. Now let's get into my final segment here, which is my favorite death, which I think is easily the arrow through the throat. I mean, I think it would be pretty much everyone's pick, and that's because it's the best death in this movie. Kevin Bacon's arrow through the throat is easily, to me, the best kill. The hottest chick is Marcy. That shirt with the kill count in this movie is 10. I'm very curious to see. I want to add it all up at the end and kind of give an overall how many kills there are in this series, and then how many kills there are in, that Jason did by himself. Obviously, he doesn't kill anyone in this one. He doesn't kill anyone in part 5. And I'm not really sure how I will rate the kills in part 9, since he's not really in his body for most of that movie. But we'll see. My favorite character is Annie, weirdly enough. I just feel like she's genuinely the sweetest person in this movie. She seems like a girl who genuinely wants to help, genuinely seems to be interested in children, isn't there just to do a job. And she talks about how it's her dream. She seems so sweet, so nice. And it's such a shame that she has to be, one of the first kills in this movie, because I feel like Pamela should have been able to realize that she was not the person that she seems to be thinking all of these kids are. People who are just going to be ignoring kids and letting them die. And so yeah, when I was watching this again, I was trying to figure out who my favorite character was. And I was kind of like, I don't really like many of these people. They don't really develop them very much. They're not really that funny or, interesting. And it just kind of kept going back to her. So as I said, it's poor. And I also found it to be notable that when Alice goes over to Pamela's car to try to drive it away, she has Annie in the front seat with her. So like she's just been driving around with Annie's corpse in her front seat this whole time. That's fucking dark, man. Those cops need to do their job better. So anyway, I'm really excited to go check out part 2 again, as I said, with a more critical eye, pointing out things I hadn't noticed before. I don't know where this one sits. I know this is, one of the ones that people dislike when they talk about, like, if I talk to like fans of this series, this is one, like the first one is one that they don't like all that much. And maybe that's the lack of Jason. Maybe, I don't know what that is, but I still hold this film in high regards. It's not my favorite in the series for sure. Part 4 is easily my favorite in the series, and I do still think it's the greatest slasher film ever made. But this one's still totally great. I had a full blast rewatching it. And another thing that I've noticed this time and many other times is that for some reason, especially these first 8, even though they're an hour and a half, they seriously feel like 30 minutes to me. They feel so fast. And it's obviously because I've seen them so many times that I remember everything, and it's just kind of like on autopilot while I'm watching it. But I don't know why they moved so quickly. It felt like I threw this thing in and it was over and I was out here talking about it. But anyway, all right, guys. I'm going to get to part 2. So until then,